All right. Let's go ahead and get started here. It's a minute after. Um, I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we should be good. So I'm Steve Carter. I'm CEO and co-founder at Nucleus Security, and today I want to talk about how to use vulnerability intelligence to help assess new vulnerabilities that come out and respond to them faster, and how to do all that using a new product that we launched last month called the Nucleus Vulnerability Intelligence Platform, or VIP for short. So thank you all for being here. I usually don't do talks like this where I focus on our product. I'm not the best salesperson, probably would make a terrible salesperson. But today I am going to talk about our product for a couple reasons. Most important being that we developed something that I really do believe is truly unique and that can add a lot of value to certain organizations that either already have or are building intelligence-led vulnerability management or vulnerability monitoring and management program, and that are spending a lot of time and a lot of resources researching new vulnerabilities and correlating vulnerabilities in their environment to some other source of vulnerability intelligence. That's really kind of where the best fit is for BIP, or the Vulnerability Intelligence Platform. And my goal today is to really keep this talk pretty simple. So I want to talk by just explaining why we built VIP in the first place, the problems that we set out to solve with VIP, and I'll give a quick overview of VIP with a live demo. So I'm going to try to keep the slides to a minimum, try to keep the talking to a minimum, and get to the fun part, which is the live demo. It's the first time we've done a live demo of VIP in public like this. It's a new product for us that we launched last month. So going to try to do all this in about 30 minutes or so, or less. And I believe we should have some time at the end for Q&A. Before I jump into all that, I do want to take a minute for the folks on the webinar that are unfamiliar with Nucleus today. I just want to take a minute and talk about who we are. Should have said that up front. First and foremost, we are known for our unified vulnerability management platform. You might call it a risk-based vulnerability management platform, RBVM. Might call it a CTEM platform. All that aside, category aside, what we really do is provide a single source of truth for all vulnerabilities, all security findings, and all vulnerability intelligence in your organization. And we do that by integrating all the scan results and the output and the reports from all your vulnerability scanning tools, all of your posture management tools, your CSPMs, your ASPMs, your anything SPMs, your XDR tools, your attack surface management tools, basically anything that detects vulnerabilities and security findings, we bring that all together. And then more importantly, we automate those workflows and those processes that take place after you discover vulnerabilities so that you can remediate fast enough to prevent breaches. That's really our mission. And so just to be clear, we don't do vulnerability scanning at Nucleus. Sometimes people think we do. You hear vulnerability management, you think of scanning. It's not what we do. We're focused on operationalizing the information that's generated by vulnerability scanning tools. And then, of course, mobilizing the people and the teams that need that information to remediate vulnerabilities that they're responsible for. So that's what we do at Nucleus in a nutshell. That's our core platform in a nutshell. But as I mentioned, today I'm going to talk about our new product. That's VIP. And so let's talk about for just a moment why we built VIP in the first place. So like most of the software that we build at Nucleus, most of the features that we build, VIP was driven by customer requests and customer feedback. These requests started to come in, I guess, about 2 to 3 years ago, after we started to incorporate our own vulnerability intelligence in Nucleus. And so we're taking in all the scan data, and we needed a layer of intelligence on top of all of that scan data so that we could have a consistent way to prioritize vulnerabilities, right? And so once we did that, right away, the first request we got was to make our intelligence available for all vulnerabilities. Instead of not just the ones that showed up in Nucleus that were already detected by scanners, but all the new vulnerabilities also that are coming out each day, right? We're now, I think, over 100 per day that are being added to the NVD. And so that was the first request we got. We got that right away. Next thing that people wanted was a way to automatically assign a custom risk rating or custom categorization to new vulnerabilities, to these new vulnerabilities as they're coming out each and every day. They also want the ability to alert when new vulnerabilities are disclosed that match some very specific conditions that they care about. And then finally, they want to be able to leverage all of this intelligence to enrich the data in other tools in their enterprises. So custom tools, SIEMs, BI tools, dashboarding tools, things like that. They wanted to be able to consume that intelligence in those external tools completely outside of Nucleus as well. And so those were the types of requests we started to get. And as we dug into all of that, we really wanted to understand what are the challenges. As with any feature request, you want to understand what's the root of it, what's the real problem that they're trying to solve. So we're able to boil everything down to a couple of primary challenges that security analysts and vulnerability analysts are having when it comes to assessing new vulnerabilities as they come out each day and each week. And the first problem is really a speed problem. And if you operate scanning tools, you know that there's a window of time between when a vulnerability is disclosed and when a signature or a plugin is available from your scanning tools. And it's not uncommon for it to take several days, sometimes longer, sometimes a week or more. And some vendors are better than others. Some are worse than others. I won't name names there. But you've got that window of time where you're kind of flying in the blind. And then there's also a window of time, obviously, between when the plugins are updated in your scanning tools and when scanning actually occurs in your environment, right? Because there's a lot of factors here. It really depends on how large your environment is, how frequently you're configured to scan for. A lot of cases, some organizations do weekly scanning, some do monthly scanning. And so you've got another gap of time on top of that. And so you're flying in the blind for what could be a period of weeks. And that was one of the big challenges that folks are trying to solve for with these feature requests. And then the second thing was really relates to the volume of data that they're trying to deal with. So as I mentioned, we're up to 100 plus new vulnerabilities a day. We've seen about 20%, I guess 15-20% year-over-year growth in the number of new vulnerabilities disclosed each year in NVD. And I think this year we might be on track for 35 to 40,000, something like that. I actually checked a few minutes before this webinar started, and we already have over 100 new vulnerabilities today as of around like 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, which is crazy. So the question that security analysts have to answer is, which of those impact their organization, to what degree, and then are there any that they need to take immediate action on? And those are really hard questions to answer that require a lot of work. And the more vulnerabilities that come out, the more work that's required, right? Pretty straightforward. All right. So enough about all the problems. I want to talk about what VIP actually is and how it helps to solve these types of problems. And I think the best way to think about VIP is as an vulnerability intelligence database that's really curated specifically for your organization, and that incorporates all the vulnerability intelligence feeds and sources and information that you really care about. And those might be paid feeds, right? It could be your Recorded Future, your Intel 471, your Mandiants, things like that. But in a lot of cases, they're just free sources of intelligence that have come out in the last few years. CISA obviously, EPSS, Shadow Server is a good source of free intelligence. So it can be any of those. Could also be custom or proprietary intelligence that your organization has. Maybe it's information that your SOC generates from the monitoring that it does. But the whole idea is that it's all in one place, and that's really our goal. No matter where the intelligence comes from, we want to bring it all together so that new vulnerabilities can be automatically assessed, automatically categorized in a way that works for your organization, not a black box, right? Opposite of a black box. And so in a way, you can kind of think of VIP, and I probably should have advanced the next slide, but in a way, you can think of VIP in the same way that you think of Nucleus, like our core platform, if you're familiar with that, at least in the sense that it aggregates, it normalizes, and then it automates some tasks, some process, some workflows. But it's doing all that with vulnerability intelligence instead of with the vulnerability data that's generated from these scanning and detection tools. Another way that some people think about VIP is that it's kind of like a threat intel platform. It's got some things in common with threat intel platforms or TIPS if you're from that world. But it's really laser focused on vulnerability and vulnerability monitoring and vulnerability management use cases, not general threat. So it's different. It's different in that regard. All right, so looks like I'm 12 minutes in. Let's go ahead and get to the fun part here. The plan is to give you a quick tour. I'm not gonna be able to show you everything, but give you a quick tour so you can kind of see VIP in action and hopefully just get a sense, get an idea of if and how it might be useful to you and your organization. So I always like to start here at the vulnerability details page. This is obviously the notorious Log4j vulnerability, 2021-44228, the one you all come to know and love. And here you've got all the information, all the intelligence about this vulnerability, again, both from commercial and open source intelligence feeds all in one place. Now, if you're an analyst and you do a lot of manual analysis of vulnerabilities, this obviously is going to save a massive amount of time because you're not bouncing around to multiple consoles, searching multiple websites to collect this information. And starting at the top here, you've got some insights about the vulnerability that were derived from multiple intelligence feeds. So for example, here we know that this vulnerability was exploited by malware because CISA said it was exploited by malware, Mandiant, PhoneCheck, they've all reported. So these are kind of aggregate fields that have pulled from multiple different feeds to answer this question of whether or not this vulnerability is exploited by malware. And you can go down the line, right? Same with exploited here. We know that this vulnerability generally was exploited in the wild because it's on the KEV list, because Mandiant and Shadow Server both observed exploitation activity in the wild, because PhoneCheck reported it. And then just kind of the next level down here, you see you've got some key information about the vulnerability, like its CVSS score, EPSS score, whether or not it's in the KEV list. And then scrolling down, let's start here. You can see we've got a bunch of intel feeds listed here, vulnerability intel feeds. And you can view all the information that each one has about this specific vulnerability here. So just looking at Mandiant, for example, you can see Mandiant's analysis of this vulnerability. They put a lot of manual analysis into each vulnerability, exploitation vectors, mitigation details, so on. And on the left side, you can also drill into all the threat actors associated with this vulnerability, known to exploit this vulnerability, all the exploits, all the technologies. This is all just from one feed, right? Just the Mandiant vulnerability intelligence feed. And across the top here for this horizontal scroll bar, you've got all the feeds that you have available that have intelligence about this specific vulnerability. So, everything. Obviously, some of these are paid, and you'd have to bring your own license for the paid ones. A lot of them are free. I think there's around a dozen or so that are free. This gray noise is really interesting. We've seen an increase in Log4j exploitation, which is I wouldn't expect right now, but I think you get the idea. Everything there is to know about any vulnerability all in one place. That's the big takeaway from this page and this part of the app. And then up at the top, a couple things I want to point out. On the right side here, you see tags. Like any tagging system, it's flexible. You can use tags to tag vulnerabilities for whatever reason you like. Most people use them to add additional context to vulnerabilities so that they can organize the data better and then be able to filter it later on in the way that they want to, filter and search on all this information. So you can add tags, add custom tags. And just above that, we've got notes. And this is really where you can put the results from all the analysis that you do, or anything that you've discovered that you want to capture and share with other people in particular. By default, these notes, they can be seen by anyone in your organization. So VIP has this concept of an organization, obviously. So as a user, you're associated with an organization. Anyone that's in your org can see this by default, but you can also flip this toggle and create private notes, take private notes as well. Let's see, what else should I point out on this page? You can bookmark vulnerabilities just as an easy way to get back to them later. You can edit risk. This is a good one. The risk levels are custom risk levels that you get to define for your organization. So we've got some really nice defaults, but the real idea here is that these risk levels align with your risk tolerance, with your organization's risk tolerance, and overall approach to risk management. And what's really cool is that these risk levels are assigned automatically based on the criteria and the conditions that you get to define. So let me actually show you how that's done really quick. All right, so just checking the chat here to make sure there's not any questions. Okay, so this is in your organization settings where you can define risk levels. And a risk level, each risk level you define has an associated search with it. And the way this works is that if a vulnerability matches the search, it's automatically assigned that risk level. And so in this case, we've got if the Mandiant risk rating is critical, or Mandiant has determined that's exploited by malware, or CISA has determined that it's exploited by ransomware, we're going to call this an existential risk to the business. And you can see there's only 352 vulnerabilities that match this criteria, thankfully. So it's a very manageable number. You should not see a lot of these each year. I think Mandiant only has, I want to say it's less than 20 vulnerabilities that they've ever rated critical, by the way. But yeah, this is not a common occurrence that new vulnerabilities like this pop up. But the idea here is, yeah, you can define as many risk levels as you'd like. We've found that generally most organizations only need 3 or 4 risk levels, maybe 5 tops. We do have some that have like 12 or 15, which is probably overkill for most organizations. But this is super, super useful to really categorize vulnerabilities and be able to prioritize in a way that's very specific to how your organization views risk. And all of this, all these risk levels and all the vulnerability intelligence, all of your notes, all of your tags, all of this is easily searchable from the Analyze page here. All right, so from this page, you can search quickly to look across all known vulnerabilities in existence using every field of every vulnerability intelligence feed to really hone in on what's important to you and extract the signal from what is a massive amount of noise. Okay, so let's say, for example, for my external attack surface, I'm interested in a combination of what CISA tells me is exploited in the wild, so it's on the CAV, and what Mandiant tells me is a high risk, right? Because high risk, they don't give you a lot of vulnerabilities with a high risk rating either. Critical and high, it's a small number. So in this case, I would say CISA CAV exists, it's true, and Mandiant risk rating is greater than medium. Let's see. So we've got 348 vulnerabilities here. Again, a pretty manageable number. You might to even whittle that down further, you might want to factor in, let's say, the probability of exploitation. So if you're a big fan of EPSS like me, these guys are awesome. You might want to also add to this an EPSS score. So let's say and EPSS score. And let's say, I don't know, 25% maybe let's go 10% and see how that changes the results here. Okay, so that knocked about another 40 or so off of this list. So 0.1 is a 10% chance of being exploited in the next, I believe it's 90 days is how they do their scoring for EPSS. And really the possibilities are endless here, because we've got access to every feed and every field from every feed. So you can come up with, we've seen some really wild and crazy searches and long searches that are combining all these different fields from all these different feeds. But there's generally a strong reason behind it, a good reason behind it. And it has to do with, number one, where the tolerance for risk is and how they're making decisions internally about prioritizing vulnerabilities. Definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach, especially for enterprise. And so all of this is great, right? Picking out signal from the noise, that's amazing. But as you all know, we can't rely on manual processes and manual procedures anymore to respond to vulnerabilities. And talk about this all the time at Nucleus with our core platform. And in VIP, the way you automate is through saved searches. Okay, so we could take this search. Let's say we're happy with this search. And click the save button. And we'll give it a name. Search. All right, so this is where you can basically tell the system to monitor for vulnerabilities that match this criteria on an ongoing basis. And it could be every minute, every hour, in number of minutes, hour, or days. You're generally going to want to monitor for new vulnerabilities that match this search, not ones that no longer match, but you can do either. You can assign a severity to the alert. And then you can get alerts in the app, in email, or in a webhook if you want to push to a chat system, a Slack, a Teams, or something like that. And so this is the way that folks are using VIP to really get notified. In a lot of cases, we see a lot of searches, saved searches being monitored every 10 minutes, right? So they're being notified every 10 minutes if there's something new that comes out that maybe matches the KEV list and an EPSS score above a certain threshold or whatever it might be, whatever you can think of. You can create a search, you can monitor it, save it, and you'll get notified over time when new vulnerabilities match up that match that search. So there's a whole lot more to VIP than this, but these are kind of the core features that I wanted to show today. And I did want to keep it right around 30 minutes, which looks like we're right at 25. So hopefully this gives you, and we have a whole lot more coming, by the way, but hopefully this gives you just a kind of a sense of what VIP is today and whether or not it's something that you can get value from. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you do think of any questions or you'll want to learn more about VIP. I kind of just scratched the surface of what we do with it. That's my email address, so you can reach me directly there. And then I did want to mention that one of my partners in crime, Scott Kufer, has an upcoming webinar on the 15th, I guess in about 3 weeks. And that is not a typo. This is why RBVM increases your security debt. That's going to be a really interesting talk. I highly recommend you check it out. You should be able to scan that QR code and register for that. And we did have let's see, it looks like we did have a question from someone. Is this open source? This is not an open source tool. This is actually a Nucleus product, a new Nucleus product that we launched about a month ago. Now, a lot of the data that we've integrated into VIP is open source. So you don't necessarily have to bring your own license for vulnerability intelligence feeds, but you can, but also there's a lot of open source vulnerability intelligence that you can use in VIP that gets the job done. And let's see, from Noah, seeing the trends being pulled from different tools. Is there a way to pull reports you could export? So we actually have a feature that's in, I believe it's still in our staging environment. That's a reporting feature where you can actually export a PDF, let's say, of the vulnerability details page that has all the intelligence about a specific vulnerability. That's going to be there if it's not there already. But one thing I didn't mention is our API, which pretty much everything that you see can be extracted via our API. And it goes back to that feature request of, hey, I want to be able to use all of this information potentially in other tools and enrich the data that's in other tools and other platforms. And so we've got a fully kind of functional API to enable you to extract all the data that we have and correlate it to vulnerabilities in other platforms as well. All right. And then finally, if you ever are interested in our unified vulnerability management platform, the core Nucleus offering, please let us know, or VIP for that matter. Please let us know. We're happy to give you a demo, to spend some time telling you about it and figuring out if we're a fit for you. It looks like one other question here, or maybe two other questions. I just had to get warmed up. Do you foresee this being used by CTI teams with no VM involvement or exclusively for VM and patching prioritization? I do see it, and we do see it used by CTI teams that I would say don't have involvement with the vulnerability management program per se, but they're on the peripheral of it in the sense that they have to be able to, let's say, implement firewall rules and implement, detections on IDSs and things like that for new vulnerabilities before any vulnerability scanning has happened, right? So it goes back to that window of time before your enterprise has scanned for it. A lot of CTI teams, they're not part of the vulnerability management team per se, and they're definitely not involved with patching things or anything like that, but they're using VIP to be able to inform them about what kind of controls they need to put in place to monitor for exploitation activity or potentially block certain types of traffic that would be indicative of exploitation activity. So we do see it being used in that way by more traditional security analysts and SOC analysts. Is it possible to adjust the risk score metrics based on our risk appetite? So most of the data that you'll see in VIP regarding scores is from some vulnerability intelligence feed or some source. What's unique to VIP, let me go back to our risk levels. So these are custom risk levels for your organization. And the idea, like I mentioned, is that you can create as many of these as you like and give them whatever name that you'd like for that matter. And that's how you really adjust things based on your risk appetite. So I've got these, three risk levels defined here. And then I can search for them. And actually, I should probably have, the risk rating. Well, I should probably add our column for the custom risk level here. You can customize your columns. So risk. So I just added the column to this table, and this is your custom risk level. This is how you're really going to want to adjust things for your own risk appetite. You're going to want to define those risk levels that match the vulnerabilities that you think should be mapped to that level. And then, of course, internally, you're going to want some meaning for those risk levels and some action that needs to be taken. So if you're familiar with like the SSVC categorization concept that CISA puts out, you might define your risk levels and then say, okay, well, if it's an existential risk level, we're going to take this action. If it's a critical risk level, we're going to take this action, etc. And API. Oh, it looks like you can't see my screen. That's strange. It says I'm sharing, but at any rate, we are good. That's it for the questions. If you've got any other questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to our team. We love talking about this stuff, and thank you all for coming out. Take care.